Day. 25 a.m. Treasury, Spire Tree Castle, Fallen Kingdom of Black Duendes, Spirit Dimension. Mark held the rough papers containing the records about the golem as he started at the humanoid contraption. According to the records, this golem was made way before this kingdom was established. They found it within the ruins where the Spire Tree Castle currently stood. That was right. The ancestors of the Black Duendes built this kingdom upon the ruins of an ancient civilization within the spirit dimension. Unfortunately, the ruins were too destroyed to the point of recognition, only leaving a few things for the current people to see. Among those relics was this golem that the Black Duendes tried to restore for hundreds of years. They did their best and managed to fix the golem. Researching and tinkering, the Black Duendes recreated its whole body. The sad thing, however, they lacked the most crucial thing: a core to make the golem move, and to the dismay of the researchers, there was no known method to create it. At least, not in their knowledge. And then, the reign of Lucario came. As the new king reigned as the most powerful compared to his predecessors, he deemed the golem worthless. And such, the research on it stopped, and the researchers that were deprived of their passion left the kingdom. All of these happened more than 200 years ago. It was such a long time. Fortunately, everything was preserved well in this treasury, and even the golem and its records were kept in good condition. Although it could be seen how Lucario saw this thing as worthless, as the valuable documents about it were left in the open near it and not stored somewhere safer. The stack of old papers on Mark's hands was quite thick that it could be bound into a textbook already. There was no way that he would be able to read everything in one go. And thus, he focused on the 4-meter-tall contraption. "Mayor, do you have any space inside your ring?" Mark asked, measuring the size of the golem with his eyes. Let me see." May replied as she closed her eyes and activated her spatial ring. "About a quarter left. It's filled with the things we picked from the street." Mark smiled wryly at that. The storage space in their rings that was as spacious as an extra-large hotel suite room was filled with items they picked up in this kingdom. Most of it was the armors and weapons of the soldiers that littered the street after they turned to dust. Not all of it was magical weapons, as it was also rare within the large number they managed to get. It was just that the items were made of strange materials that Mark found interesting. In fact, there should be more of these items. However, they left the armor of those dead bodies that did not turn to dust after they died. "I'll free up mine then. Store the things I take out in yours," Mark said as he started emptying his ring. "Master, you're going to take this big thing back?" Emihan asked as she flew towards the face of the golem, poking where the eyes should be located. She could not understand it, after all. Like how Lucario disregarded this thing, once one was powerful enough, this thing would be useless. And Mark, who easily defeated Lucario, was far more powerful. Even the base might have no need for this as it was doing fine with several layers of defenses. In fact, Emihan thinks that it was currently overprotected. "Why not?" Mark asked Emihan. "It's missing a core, though." Emihan replied, circling at the golem, but then, Mark smiled. "We have 3, though." "Huh?" Emihan turned to Mark, confused. It was when the 3 girls took out something from the bag that Iola was carrying. Each of them showed a different colored stone ball on their hands. Ah! Emihan finally remembered. The gifts from Bathala. It was the gift that the 3 girls received from the god of creation of Philippine mythology. The hearts of living dolls. This might have a different name in Bathala's words, but living dolls were, without a doubt, golems. And now, they one in front of them that was missing its own. "Master. Let's try it. Let's try it." Emihan danced around, exited. She completely forgot about the tea gifts that the 3 received. "Let's try it later. Or else, I might have done that already." Mark rolled his eyes while he waved the stack of documents he had. "I haven't read all of this yet. It's better to understand everything they knew before trying it out." That was right. Mark knew almost nothing about this thing. Just because they found one did not mean that they should immediately jump in to try something idiotic. What if the core could not be retrieved anymore? Or what if this thing could not be customized at all? Even Mark would feel bad if his little girls received something they did not like. In any case, this golem they found as the base, Mark would be able to study it and create his own golems in the near future. Okay. Amihan grumbled. She might not find the significance of having a golem, but in the least, she wanted to see if it could really move. By the way, are you three always carrying those? Of course, Amihan would ask that. Such precious items were being carried everywhere, and not even inside Mark's or May's spatial rings. Because we want to, Iola replied. Don't bother asking them. Mark interjected. I asked them the same before, but they always kept it inside Iola's bag. They don't even want to keep it inside our rings unless necessary. Amihan could only scratch her head. The little girls were really the same as their adoptive parents, strange people that were hard to understand. It took about half an hour to tidy things up. With a bit of effort, Mark forcefully opened a wide black hole to make the golem enter his ring. After storing the golem into his spatial ring, they continued to tour the treasury and see if other things would interest them. Unfortunately, the contents of the treasury, while having a wide variety, had no value for Mark's group. Weapons made of gold, accessories with beautiful gems, and even the softest cloth that existed in this kingdom. Well, the last one made Mark interested, but most of the items were just for pure luxury. Among the accessories, Mark only found 5 that exuded a magical aura, and, of course, he kept these things immediately. There were also 2 sets of gaudy magical armor and 3 weapons. Sadly, both armors were for heavy infantry. As for the weapons, there was a sword, a bow, and a spear. Mark tried to look for a shield, but there seemed to be none to his disappointment. Those things aside, the rest of the space available inside Mark's ring was filled with materials. There were horns of magical beasts, metal ingots that seemed to be what the armor of the soldiers was made of, and also some magical stones. The materials were quite in a variety, and it seemed that they were keeping these things in preparation for something. Unfortunately for Mark, there was no way to carry everything. Their rings were already full, even the bags they had. And yet, there was still a large pile of unrefined ores and other things inside smaller rooms. Making Chaflar carry all these was not advisable as they still had to travel back. They would need to fly, without a doubt, as this place would definitely be swarmed by the infected because of the earlier commotion. It seems that we can't carry everything, May said with quite a pity. Now, they could only wish that they brought Sparrow with them. Gerger, are we going back here to get everything else? She asked Mark. I don't think we need to immediately. Mark shook his head. Probably, we can after the dimensions fused. May nodded. It was understandable as this place would definitely appear on Earth after the fusion. Due to that, it would be easier to transport these things as Sparrow would need lesser energy to spend to open portals. Packing up everything they could, they returned to where everyone was waiting. Unexpectedly, there was quite a commotion. The slaves were feeling down for some reason. Mark could not help but shrug. The slaves looked better as the smell of cooked food emanated from the surroundings. It seemed that Edsel and Pear cooked some instant noodles for the slaves to fill their stomachs. But then, why were they feeling down? What happened? Mark asked Pephile, who was leaning on the wall, watching the spectacle. Did they learn that Earth now is facing ruin? Surprisingly, Pephile had a wry smile. It's worse than that. Mark tilted his head. Remember that time here goes slower than the mortal world, right? A-. Mark froze a bit. It was true. Although the time was starting to get in line between dimensions, it just started recently. Before, while a bit unstable, time here in the spirit dimension was far slower than Earth. And that lay the problem for these slaves. Pephile then started pointing at the slaves. Without a doubt, they were unable to accept reality. That wounded old man seemed to be here for about 2 decades already. Probably more or less. They stopped counting, after all. Pephile narrated. He asked us if what happened to the battle in Lamon Bay. But we knew nothing about it. He then said that the Japanese army were attacking when he got lost in the forest. That was when he was captured by demons and was brought here. Mark looked at the old man that was covering his eyes while lying down on a soft carpet. He appeared to be in either the early 60s or late 50s. He then racked up his brain a bit as he took a seat at a nearby sofa with May and the girls. The invasion of Laman Bay. It happened from 1941 to 1942. It meant that while it was just 2 decades that this man had been here, already about 79 years had passed on Earth. And by the looks of it, the other slaves were in the same circumstances. Of course, they did not come from the old man's time, but they still came from years way in the past. Knowing that they had been lost in time after being abducted, it was no wonder that these slaves undergone another episode of a mental break. What would happen if they learned that Earth now was nothing but a place filled with infected trying to kill the living? Mark started to wonder if he really had to let these people go with his group. However, these people were quite hard to let go of. Why? Just think how these 9 managed to survive a battle against demons with their emaciated bodies. That was right. Compared to the other slaves, these 9 were not the same. Or at least, not anymore. From what Mark felt from them, they were evolvers. Mutagen had invaded the spirit dimension, after all. But different from evolvers on Earth, these people were emanating magical energy from their bodies, albeit weak that most people would not notice. It was not surprising since they evolved in an environment filled with magical energy. Mark wanted to see if he could keep them and nurture them to become magic users. If that succeeded, not only Mark could save on crystals, but he would have a very versatile group of magic users. However, it seemed that they had to overcome their unstable minds first. Accept everything, their past, the present, and their possible future. In any case, Mark could only wait and see. Not everything could be forced. Day 143 to 7:31 p.m. Arctic ice cap. Under the Arctic ice cap, the cold sea flowed without any unusual changes. However, further below, a hidden place was afloat, moving across the underground icy waters. A strange cube made covered in ice and frost was how it would look like to others. Inside the cube, however, was a structure that most humans in the world would not imagine. It was a strangely magical structure, while at the same time, it appeared to be constructed by futuristic science. The gray walls were clean as a hospital's corridors, tiles as shiny as gems, and lights as bright as day. The phosphorus tubes that lined the walls showed a mystical aura filling the place. No one would think that such a structure like this would exist in one of the most unexplored places on Earth. Now, however, 2 people entered the widely opened entrance that, strange enough, blocked with some an invisible barrier that did not allow ice and water to enter. Even small animals like strange-looking crustaceans and fishes could not enter. "We finally arrived," the man said as he led down the gorgeous woman he was carrying and protecting in his arms. "Master, is your body okay? The water in these depths is very harsh. You also had to protect me," the woman said as she worriedly grasped the man's large hand. "Don't worry, Ilya," the man smiled while caressing the woman's hair. "You know what my body is. This much won't harm me." "But Master still used up a lot of energy. You also had to fight all those monsters while searching for this place. It's better if we rest here at the entrance first before entering. Who knows what the Creator had left here?" Ilya insisted. "Then, as you wish." The man, the anti-god Chimera, agreed with the woman's proposition. These 2 were no other than Chimera and Ilya that went to the icy Arctic region in search of their place of origin. The laboratory of the Creator, the mad researcher that wanted to contend against the gods of that time. Chimera might be something made to be powerful. However, he was not invincible or omnipotent. To find the place they wanted to go, they had to spend a lot of time and struggled quite a bit. He had to fight and kill monsters that were unfathomable to humankind. Kinds of monsters that were not even listed in any form of literature in the past and the present. Furthermore, Chimera's body was not made to withstand the pressure in the deepest depths of the ocean for too long. That was one reason that they took too long to find this place that they had just entered. What was more was that this place was not something built steadily on any surface but floated, drifting under the icy sea of the Arctic. Finally, they managed to step into the place of their birth. The place that many unfathomable creatures were born. This structure went by the ingenious name of the Ice Cube. It would sound funny, but it was not given by the creator but the people of the past. Of course, it was because the whole structure was made to be a perfect cube that was covered ice, but not only that. This structure had defenses that would use the icy energy within the surroundings to destroy enemies. In fact, it was one of the things that Symmetris was afraid of. Even he would get harmed by these defenses that were mercilessly designed by the creator. The creator was aiming to go against the gods. And, of course, the defense weapons of the Ice Cube were also at that level. When Symmetris was looking for this place, he came alone and was cautious about everything. Fortunately, when he found the Ice Cube, it seemed that the defenses did not activate as he checked. He did not know why. Maybe it was broken after thousands of years without maintenance. And now, Symmetris brought Ilya with him, thwarting all dangers, just to explore more about what happened in the place of their origin. "It's good that we finally found this place," Symmetris said, looking at the surroundings. "That's right. It took us many days just to find this place. It drifted too far from its original location after thousands of years." Ilya sighed in tiredness. "Just why did our creator make this thing drift following the northern magnetic pole?" "Don't complain too much." Symmetris shrugged. "By the current Earth's standards, it was already too fast for us to find this place." That was right. It might have taken several days for them to find it, but compared to humans that did not even know about its existence, it was already fast. And now, after a quick rest, they would explore the remains of their place of origin. ******* Day 144 to 7:31 a.m. Bay City Settlement, Parañaque City, Metro Manila. With the Philippine military, its people, and the superhumans, the Bay City Settlement was still standing strong. Though for the most part, it was the superhumans that was keeping it that way for the most part. Superhumans. The term had not been used until 2 weeks ago. It was the term categorizing both mutators and evolvers as a whole. Of course, the difference in strength and abilities were still there between the two. However, the terminology had to be used as there was a sudden increase in evolvers from the general populace. And for the most part, soldiers that were always participating in battles held the majority of the numbers. At the moment, the effects of mutagen on people became apparent for the populace. Their bodies were stronger than before the outbreak, with some exceptional people. It was the best circumstance considering that the infected were growing stronger for every single day that passed. And, of course, it did not come without any trouble. Having more power than in the past made some people gain confidence, well, in a negative way. They became unruly, and some, making more uncontrollable groups that tormented other people while the military was not looking. In fact, just this week, dozens of instances were reported, and they had to exile 10 people for disregarding the rules. Not to mention some that they had to kill on the spot as they tried to kill people for the meager conflicts they had. Looking at this situation, it was quite apparent that the stress of surviving in the crumbling world was already affecting many people. For the worst part, receiving more power was a trigger for them to release it. This situation was not really helpful, considering that the scope of the military's activities was getting wider and wider. Resources in the close vicinity of the settlement were getting scarcer and scarcer. To gather more supplies, they had to move further away from Bay City. Not only that it would pose more danger to the soldiers, but it would also weaken the defense of the settlement. The situations where scavenging groups, private or military, had to spend a day or two outside was also increasing. But as if this was not hard enough to survive, today, Randy Rondo ahem, the world decided to add another hurdle for everyone. Ashes brought by the wind covered the sky. The ash fell like snow, together with the smell of burnt cement in the air. It was not a good thing as not only visibility was affected, but it would also pose respiratory inflictions to many people. All of these were coming from the south, and from what it looked like. Tall volcano had erupted. Currently, the higher-ups of Bay City were in an emergency meeting to conduct measures to the current situation. Just what in the world is going on? Does the god really want to kill us all? An officer could not help but complain as he slumped on his seat. It was quite obvious that this man did not have enough rest due to the eye bags under his eyes. "General, should we recall all the scavenging groups?" Another officer suggested. "Continuing with the current situation would be dangerous." "I also have that notion." General Perez nodded. "It is better to tighten our supplies a bit than to lose people." Still, just why does Tal had to erupt now? Everyone was disgruntled at that question. It was when Professor County spoke. "You all can't blame anything for the eruption. It would happen sooner or later. In my opinion, it's already late. The Earth's temperature had gone down a month after the apocalypse. With global warming getting addressed, it will also affect the volcanoes, delaying the eruption." They all stared at the professor. Of course, no one could refute him. It was a natural calamity, and no one would be able to blame nature. "We really can't do anything about the falling ash. Instead, we should focus on the people. I don't think that the tent city will be able to endure the ashfall." Captain Della Rosa interjected. That was also another problem. Everyone could not help but give a deep sigh as to how problems were piling up one after another. At this time, they could not help but envy the new Infanta settlement. Although they had experienced a disaster not long ago, their situation was getting better compared to Bay City. In the latest report that they received through the radio, the new Infanta settlement was already cultivating mutated crops and herding mutated animals. In the future, their state would just become more and more stable. Still, there was also another problem they did not know whether to believe or not. Also, from the new Infanta settlement, the intel that the second wave of the apocalypse would come. It was quite serious if it was a joke. However, in the current situation, it was doubtful if General Faustino would allow false information to go through just like that. And the most important part, it seemed that the root of information was someone they knew and could not ignore, Mark. Of course, it did not come directly from him but from someone in his group. It was from Colleen Bautista, a rather famous actress in the past and the daughter of Major Bautista, which was one of the important foundations of the new Infanta settlement. The day was still early for Bay City settlement, but they had a lot of hurdles to face for survival. ******* Day 144 to 8:11 a.m. Island Cove, Covelandia Road, Binakayan, Kawit, Cavite. At the same time, 10 kilometers southwest of Bay City, there was a settlement of about 200 people. Being 7 kilometers closer to Tal Volcano than Bay City, they experienced the ashfall much earlier. Eland Cove was a resort hotel in Cavite surrounded by waters with only a single 100-meter bridge leading in and out of the compound. It was a strategic place to hold out in the apocalypse as long as they had enough supplies. And to say, they were in the same dilemma because of the ashfall. Even so, it seemed that their scavenging group was still preparing to head out. "Leader, are we still going to scavenge in this situation?" A man from the scavenging group asked their leader. "It's better to scavenge now while the ashfall is still thin. We should get as many supplies as while we still can." The leader replied, making everyone understand. Well, even if they did not want to, their leader would still go out alone. After all, he had a deep grudge towards the infected that he would kill any infected on sight. The stronger the infected, the stronger their leader also became. At the same time, the more bloodthirsty he grows until he defeated the enemy. It was quite a strange ability. However, it was the same ability that kept the people here alive. After all, the road was too dangerous for them to travel to Bay City anymore. Still, their leader was a strange one. From what they knew, he came from Bay City but left. "Leader." Suddenly someone called out, entering the room where the scavenging group was preparing. "What is it?" A horde wandered by the other side of the bridge. "Good." The leader replied, not even asking the number of infected as he rushed out immediately. And there, their leader, Joseph Macarag, made another bloodthirsty massacre. Day 143 to 8:10 p.m. The ice cube, Arctic depths replenishing some of the energy he used up to reach this place. Shemetris led Ilya to enter the door that led to the interior of the ice cube. Approaching the door, The two could not help but raise their heads and look upward. There was a feeling of nostalgia in their eyes. After all, even though it might be less time in their sense of time, it was still several thousand years since they'd been here. However, it was not the only reason. It was because the door was gigantic. In front of them was a 7-meter tall double door that was 5 meters wide and had a thickness of half a meter. Not to mention that it was made of metal several times harder than titanium. Its weight was unfathomable that this pair of doors alone would make anyone question as to how this place was kept afloat. It was such a door that even most deities could not force open. And due to that, it did not even need any kind of lock to keep it in place. Because it was such a kind of door, a piece of machinery that could open it automatically did not exist. Back in the days, there was a pair of golems that stood guard in front of this door. The two were tasked to specifically open these doors to its owners and invited visitors. There were two golems not because of aesthetics. It was because these two doors would not move unless both were pushed at the same time. And to say, just those two golems were quite a topic of envy due to the fact that while those two were not flexible in other aspects, their raw strength was on par with higher deities. Imagine how that kind of monstrous power was just being used to open and close these doors. Now, however, no signs of the two golems could be seen. Who knows what happened to them? Even so, it was questionable that the two golems were destroyed as there was no sign of previous battles were present at the entrance. "I'm opening it," Shemetris spoke as he placed his palms on the doors. Forcing all the physical strength in his body, Shemetris groaned as he pushed the doors open. He might struggle to open these doors, but an anti-god weapon like him would not be stopped by it. Nevertheless, it took a large amount of effort to open the doors. Shemetris only needed to make an opening enough for him and Ilya to slip through. Even so, it took him 20 minutes of continuous pushing to create enough gap between the doors. As the gap between the doors was created, they could feel the air was colder inside for some reason. Even so, the freezing temperature did not deter them as Shemetris enveloped himself and Ilya with a protective aura. Finally, they managed to enter the door, and to say, Shemetris and Ilya were surprised. The whole place was wrecked. It was unexpected, considering there was no sign of fighting outside the doors. Furthermore, the doors were closed. Which enemy would close a door after wrecking the whole place, anyway? Nevertheless, looking at the well-preserved dead bodies lying everywhere, the conflict came from inside the laboratory. The dead bodies did not belong to any human, deity, or god. It was monsters that were unfathomable to people of both the past and the present. Shemetris and Ilya walked along the corridors dimly lit by phosphorus lights. While moving, they could not help but look at the preserved bodies. Near the door, there was a feline covered in metal scales. Its back was deeply dented, which might have caused its death. Not far from it, they saw the body of a large bird with gills. It was kind of hard to deduce what bird it was as its head already turned into meat paste with its beak lying in front of it. Another scene was a 9-meter-long snake with a body as thick as a human. However, instead of scales, it had wire-like fur covering its body. Its body was coiled onto another monster with an appearance that was hard to explain. It could be a bear with a turtle shell or a turtle with a bear's head and limbs. The fur-covered snake coiled around it, crushing its turtle shell, causing its death. It killed the snake, though, as its fangs were still deeply rooted at the snake's neck. The abominations did not end there. While Shemetris and Ilya continued deep into the laboratory and passed by empty rooms with broken glass chambers, they saw more and more dead bodies. One was a cobra with a plant-like body. Another was a scorpion with bat wings. Next was a dragonfly with pincers. And there was also a big green caterpillar with 100 legs of a beetle. There was a large variety, and all of them were of monstrous size. The smallest one they saw so far was a crystal pillbug that was about the size of a basketball. The creator had a lot of fun after we're gone, didn't he? Shemetris said as he walked under the frozen body of an octopus-legged lizard that was stuck on the ceiling. To create all these things, the creator must have planned something. Ilya replied with a frown. That's right. That man is always scheming something. These creatures might just be a preparation for a huge plan. Unfortunately, it seems something happened for each and every single one of these creatures to be dead and outside their chambers. Going through the freezing corridors, they continued. The goal of this journey was the core area of the ice cube. It was the place of birth for both Gemetris and possibly all these dead monsters. As they continued, the dead bodies did not decrease at all. In fact, it increased further, making it harder to wave through the dead bodies. Master, looks like the cold is coming from that chamber, Ilya said as she pointed at an open room. The two peeked into the room, and there, Gemetris and Ilya saw the cause of this freezing temperature. Unexpectedly, the impregnable walls of the ice cube was broken through by who knows what. There was a huge gap in the wall. Fortunately, the whole fortress was still covered with a barrier, and the seawater did not enter. However, also because of that, a thick sheet of ice covered the gap. It was causing this freezing temperature inside the laboratory. Just what in the world was able to punch through this wall? Even deities and lower gods would not be able to make a hole like this easily. This hole in the wall might also be the reason why Gemetris encountered a lot of monsters while looking for this place. All of those monsters might either be those that managed to survive or their descendants. We can't do anything about that right now, Gemetris said. Let's go. The two then continued, changing floors and moving towards the core of the structure. The ice cube was not too large. However, its corridors were designed to be a maze filled with experimental chambers, making the travel take too long. Furthermore, a lot of things in the ice cube changed from what they remembered, making it harder to find the core room. The way to the core was quite uneventful. Everything inside the laboratory was dead, after all. And soon, they reached the core of the laboratory and was about to enter its broken-down metal doors. At the door, however, they finally saw where the two golems that were supposed to be at the entrance. The two golems lay near the center of the core room, smashed into pieces. Not only the golems but a lot of apparatus in the core room were destroyed. And there, Gemetris and Ilya's attention became focused on something. The creator's old body dangled on the wall with a metal spike embedded in his heart. Gemetris and Ilya finally entered the core room, wanting to investigate what in the world happened here. But then, whirling sounds echoed as if a machine was suddenly powered up. The dim core room was suddenly lit up, along with the remaining apparatus inside. Both Gemetris and Ilya were surprised by the sudden event. The two of them readied their battle stance, waiting for any possible threat. It was when several beams of light were shot in the middle of the core room, converging into an image. That image, however, made Gemetris frown and made Ilya shocked. I never thought that you will come back here, Gemetris. It seemed that you were properly able to recreate your body after thousands of years. The voice of an old man echoed into their ears, as the lights converged into an image of a person. Of course, the image was no other than the creator, the master of the ice cube, and the maker of Gemetris and the monsters in this place. It seems your consciousness is still alive, creator. Gemetris spoke with a cold tone. Ha ha ha. The creator laughed. Alive? No, unfortunately. The true body died and his soul was eaten by his last creation. As for me, I'm nothing but a piece of consciousness. You can consider me as an imprint. Of course, the true body is not powerful enough to create one, so he combined the power of magic and technology to create me. The creator explained as he floated towards Gemetris and Ilya. That, however, caused the two to raise their guard. You two don't have to be on guard. I can't do anything but speak. And even though I'm created by him and was a piece of his consciousness, I'm different from the true body. The creator, no, the creator's imprint, explained further. Of course, the two still did not let down their guard. I guess I can't blame your suspicions. The image turned around and floated back to the center of the room. I won't tell you two to relax. Even so, I will answer your questions if you have any. With those words, Gemetris and Ilya also walked to the center of the room. Of course, the two could not help but look around, estimating the extent of destruction in this place. Finally, Ilya could not hold it any longer. just what happened to this place?" she asked, turning to the projection. The old man then smiled and replied, "It's a long story which spanned several years, and whether you two believe it or not, it had something to do with the two of you." Those words took the attention of Chimetras. Seeing that Chimetras was now listening, the imprint continued. "You two should know the true body's ambition, right? To create a godly being that can contend against gods. Fame and riches did not matter to him as long as he could create the ultimate being." Chimetras replied, "You are correct." The old man nodded. "And you are his first successful creation that should have fulfilled his ambition. A chimera based off an archangel, composed with bodies of divine and mystical creatures. A body resilient and almost indestructible, together with a soul that could not be vanquished. Not even by the gods in that era." Chimetras closed his eyes. Everything that the projection said was true. Although he was defeated, he could not be killed, and thus, they sealed him with a powerful curse. "However, there was a problem with you," and then the old man continued. "At first, you were an obedient child, following his orders. Nothing but a puppet. However, you slowly gained awareness because of her." The projection then turned to Ilya. "Soon, you started to disobey his orders. Fortunately, you were sealed before you start to rebel." And at this point, the projection turned his head away, looking at the empty air in front of him. At the same time, a broken projection similar to a screen started to play a fuzzy recording. Chimetras, you being sealed and gaining awareness drove him to create another one. Then, the image of a creature flashed on the screen. Unlike you, however, that was modeled from an archangel. The second one is of an archdevil. Day 143 to 10:15 p.m. Core Laboratory, the Ice Cube, Arctic Depths. The fuzzy image flashed unstably, revealing a creature that was, albeit the same as Chimetras, but was also too different. Like Chimetras, it was a humanoid chimera with body parts that came from different creatures. Unlike those of Chimetras, however, just from the image alone, they could tell that each body part had a sinister aura of its own. It had skin covered in red scales, a mouth with several layers of pointed teeth, red eyes covered in flames, muscular arms covered in woven fur, and two legs that seemed to have come from a bull. On its head, instead of hair, it had red flames as if it was an elemental deity. And also different from Chimetras that had 6 wings, it only had a pair of blood-red wings that emanated an aura of a dragon. And, of course, a characteristic that was present on archdevils, the spiraled horn of a ram. Compared to Chimetras, it seemed that there were fewer body parts used in the creation of this one. However, the entirety of its body appeared to be far more powerful than Chimetras in terms of raw strength. That, however, was what made it even stranger. How come that something like this was composed of fewer body parts could give out such a menacing power compared to Chimetras? "Can you see this?" The hologram spoke. "This is your younger brother, Trimera." Chimetras did not say anything and continued to observe the fuzzy screen, making the old man continue. "Don't be fooled by its appearance just because it had fewer components. I can tell that you feel it even just by this image. The explosive power that this lad had." The old man then turned to Chimetras. "Your body had unfathomable resilience, endurance, and hardness. Even if you get hurt, you will heal perfectly fine after a while. Trimera is different. His body is not as resilient as yours, but it might be possible that he can destroy your body if you got careless. I am sure that you already saw the hole in one chamber on your way here. Trimera was the one that made that to escape. An explosive strength that even this impregnable place could not withstand." "How did that happen?" Ilya interjected. "Even gods could not easily enter this place. Where would the Creator get body parts that can display such strength?" The old man smiled and asked, "Do you remember what you saw along the way after entering this place?" Ilya grew silent as she realized the strange hybrid monsters that no one had seen before. Back then, before they left this place, although the Creator had experiments regarding such a subject, it was still in infancy. And using the methods to preserve the body parts and patching them out together to form a creature, Chimetras was born. Because of the creation of Chimetras, it became easier for the creator to create more hybrids. Body parts fused in a chimera would either reject each other during failure or complement each other at success. It was like the success of Chimetras, whose body parts functioned together, creating a stronger and more resilient body. At that time, the true body only used mythical and divine creatures for experimentation. The old man said, "But after you, Chimetras, was sealed, he found a few things wrong with his research." "About me having awareness?" Chimetras asked. "While that was one, it was not all." The old man shook his head. "What the true body wanted is a weapon that could kill ruthlessly, whether it be a god or not. Unfortunately, that was one thing that you lacked. Even that succubus, beside you, had more bloodlust than you. The true body thought that it was a failure to use mythical creatures alone. And that is why he started to dabble in the experimentation of demonic creatures for his next anti-god weapon. Of course, it was not easy. Using body parts of demonic creatures caused more failure than success. It was especially because these body parts had a volatile nature compared to non-demonic creatures. But then, as he continued on the experimentation, the creator accidentally found something. The creator saw a circumstance that only happened during failure and only when using body parts from certain demonic creatures. Using a stronger body part on a weaker body could result in that body part draining the vitality, causing imbalance and rejection on the subject, and would likely result in death. However, that dead body itself could be used for experimentation of other things. And that was when the creator noticed that the body part that caused death became stronger than before as he put it on other creatures. And thus, the creator started to create hybrids for such purpose, cultivating the demonic body parts and making them grow stronger. The stronger it grew, the stronger the experimental subject was needed, and he created more. It was to the point that he created hybrids far stronger than most creatures in the world. It was only to cultivate certain body parts that he would need to create the next anti-god weapon. After a few years of painstaking experiments and the creation of hundreds to thousands of hybrid monsters, he reached the point where the body parts he wanted to use became on par with each other in terms of vitality and strength. Putting all those things together, Trimera was born. The creature of pure strength and speed, an archdevil chimera. And to prevent the past failure from Chimetras gaining awareness, the creature made sure to wipe out any sign of consciousness on his new creation. Without it, Trimera should be nothing but a mere puppet, right? But that was where it went wrong. At this point, the screen showed the last scene of Trimera's creation. It was the time for the creator to wake up the new humanoid chimera. The two golems that were supposed to safeguard the entrance was there to secure the safety of the creator. After all, there were times that new hybrids would react violently. Of course, he was confident that it would not happen as he did not give Trimera any capability of thought. The creator pushed the buttons on his apparatus, draining the liquid in the glass chamber Trimera was in. Soon, it woke up, not peacefully, but filled with rage. It broke out of its capsule and charged onto the first moving object it saw, the golems. With a blurred flash, the two golems were suddenly smashed into pieces. Even the creator was not able to see how that happened. The creator immediately activated the security measures, activating the barrier to protect him while deploying weapons to subdue Trimera. But it was all useless. Trimera picked up a metal part from the smashed golem, twisting it into a spike, and threw it towards the creator. The barrier shattered like glass, and the metal spike pierced the creator on his chest. Although he was wearing protective clothing that stopped the metal spike from turning him into meat paste from the impact, it caused the force to throw him onto the wall, nailing him midair. Of course, he died there. There was no way that he would be surviving after his heart was destroyed. After that, Trimera went on a rampage, attacking and killing every creature it came across in the ice cube. The frozen bodies all over the halls and rooms were the remains of that onslaught. After a while, Trimera seemed to want to go out of this place but did not know where the exit was. Thus, he punched a random wall, continuously, for several days. He was like a beast digging a way out of a cage. That was how the large hole in that chamber was created and where Trimera escaped out. It was a total failure, the hologram said with another shake of his head. Just what happened? Ilya asked. Didn't he erase any ability of thought from that guy? That was the cause of failure, my dear. The old man smiled. I analyzed the data of the true body's last research and found the reason. Removing any ability of thought on Trimera was the reason. It might have been fine if Trimera was made of the same creatures that Symmetris had. However, his body was made of cultivated demonic body parts, and these demonic creatures were malicious and violent in nature. A body without thoughts made out of body parts from vicious creatures. It was nothing but a violent beast. We can't deny that he succeeded, though. Symmetris spoke. In creating a creature capable of destruction and killing gods. Even the wall that most gods could not even dent was broken by him. Ha ha ha. The old man laughed. You don't have to be sarcastic. It was a failure through and through. Rumble. Suddenly, Symmetris and Ilya felt some shaking. What is going on? Ilya could not help but panic. So, we are out of time, the old man said with a sad expression. What do you mean? Symmetris asked with a frown. What do you think? The old man shrugged. You saw the destruction that Trimera did after waking up. A lot of things in this laboratory were destroyed. For several thousand years, everything that remained here was in a dormant state to preserve its condition. However, you two came, and I had to wake up. This drained the remaining energy that kept this place afloat. You. Symmetris could not help but blame the hologram. After all, they barely got in here, and there were things they needed to do. And all of that just to know that it would soon sink into the bottom of the icy ocean. You can't blame me, Symmetris. Sooner or later, this would happen. It was already a miracle that after thousands of years, it still managed to keep afloat. In the least, it is good that I managed to relay the last moments of the true body's life. And to say, warn you two of a possible threat. Symmetris grew silent. There was no way to refute the old man. Wait, is that thing still alive? Ilya asked. Unfortunately, yes. The old man shrugged as a hidden cabinet opened nearby. Inside was a glass capsule containing an odd flame inside. This is a part of the flames on Trimera's head. If this flame was extinguished, it meant that he died. However, as you can see, he's still alive somewhere, isn't it? Symmetris said, closing his eyes. Yes. The old man nodded. Unfortunately, there was no way to tell where he is right now. Also one thing. If he is still alive, there is a high chance that he gained intelligence after several thousand years. You two should be careful since he might target you too, especially you, Symmetris. Why is that? Ilya asked. You two might not know it, but a chimera without a soul is nothing but a dead body. Both Symmetris and Trimera were two pieces of one soul. I'm sure that you understand what that meant. Symmetris took a deep breath and wanted to ask another question. However, rumble. The whole place shook once more, and now, it was stronger. You two should leave already. The old man's visage started to stutter. Take the capsule. It will warn you too if Trimera is nearby. All right. Thank you, Symmetris said as he took the capsule from the cabinet. Go to the top floor of the laboratory, the old man instructed in the last second, and like an unplugged television, the old man flickered and vanished. Rumble. The shaking started to intensify. However, it seemed that it was still being controlled. Without a doubt, the old man was still doing his best to keep the place afloat until the two left. And as the old man instructed, Symmetris and Ilya rushed to the top floor. It was called the landing chamber. A part of the ice cube that could detach like a ship and be used at times when the creator had to gather more specimen on land. Ilya, do you remember how to operate this? Symmetris asked Ilya, who already rushed to the control panel. Master, there are some changes but it seemed that we can still use it. The energy reserve is quite low, though. It can only operate for a day or two. Good, let's leave. And there, cracking the ice that covered the ice cube, the landing chamber detached from the main structure for the first time in several thousand years. At the same time, the main structure of the ice cube started to lose altitude. It was the final moments of the laboratory where two anti-god weapons were born before it sunk into the deepest depths of the icy ocean. Day 144 to 9:26 a.m. Kovlandia Road, Binakayan, Kawit, Cavite. The survivors of Island Cove Resort watched their leader as he laid the whole horde to waste. It was quite a large one, and it took more than an hour for the battle to end. Although what made it take that long was not the initial horde but those infected that were attracted to the ongoing fight. As usual, the battle was a bloody one. Leading the fight was, of course, their leader. He was a strong person in their eyes, capable of eliminating hundreds of infected alone. If there was something a bit disturbing about his qualities, it was his method of killing the infected. Every kill he made was as bloody as possible. At times, he would chop off the infected's limbs first, causing the limbless infected to squirm on its accumulating pool of blood before killing it. There were also times that he would stab the biters to the point that it bled to the point of dying. And at the moment that it became an eater, that was only when its life would end by their leader's blade. There were various ways of killing their leader displayed before. All of it was bloody. However, among all of it, there was one that seemed to be his favorite. It was to split the bodies of the infected in half, bisecting their bodies right at the stomach. It would cause the infected's organs to splatter everywhere like candies in a jar that fell to the floor. Now that the battle had ended, the survivors had no choice but to go out. The corpses of the infected littered the bridge and the road connected to it. If they wanted to use this road, they had to remove the dead bodies no matter how they were repulsed to do so. After all, every battle that their leader led was always a bloody mess. However, despite how their leader was towards the infected, he never pointed his bloodlust towards his allies. In fact, it felt like he was two different people in one body, comparing his personality towards humans and towards the infected. "Leader, are we still going out? The ashfall is starting to pick up." A teenager approached Joseph and asked while covering his nose with a handkerchief. This boy was also part of the scavenging team. No one knew his real name, but he went by the alias Ace. "It's more the reason that we should go out as soon as possible," Joseph replied, wiping off the splatter of blood on his face. "If this ashfall continued, it will become more dangerous." "But still, did a volcano erupt, or it's another strange thing?" Ace said, looking up at the darkened sky. "Who knows?" Joseph shrugged. "Normally, ashfalls accompanied volcanic eruptions, but we don't have any way of knowing. There's no TV or internet anymore." At this point, several people approached the two. "Leader, we're ready to go," one of them said, calling to Joseph. And by their appearance, all of them were part of the scavenging group. It was a group of 14 people. Ace looked around. "Where's Wally?" the boy asked. It seemed that the group was missing a person. I'm here, a scrawny-looking teenager came running. "Seriously, all of you, why did you leave me behind?" "Because you're too slow," the muscular-bodied man among the group, Andres, said, slapping Wally on his back jokingly. "Ow!" Wally winced in pain, causing the group to burst out in laughter. "All right, it ends here." Joseph clapped as he ended the commotion. "Let's go." And here, while the other survivors cleaned up the bridge of the bodies, dumping the bodies onto the river, the scavengers left on foot. It was not like they could not afford to use a vehicle. However, with the limited gasoline that the group could use now, it was better to reserve those for emergencies. Passing through the dead bodies, Joseph took a glance south of the bridge. There, he could see a high flyover. To others, it might be nothing but a normal contraption. A now desolate road littered with infected and abandoned vehicles. To him, however, it was the very same flyover that changed his life entirely. It was the very same exact place where his father took his last breath. That was why Joseph was here. After recovering, he left Bay City. It was to retrieve the remains of his father that he was not able to see at all after he fainted that night. In the least, he wanted to give his father a proper burial. Unfortunately, Bad things always happen in the apocalypse. With his newfound strength, he managed to reach the very same place on foot, with a trail of blood behind him. However, while the remains of the destroyed military vehicles were there, all he found were pieces of gnawed bones and wandering mutated infected. It was the scene he expected, although he still hoped to find his father's body, or at least, his bones. However, with the hundreds of broken pieces scattered around, there was no way to identify what belonged to who. Thus, he gathered all the bones around the scene and buried them all together, hoping that at least one of those bones was his father's. On the burial, that was when he encountered the survivors of Island Cove. From then on, he stayed at this place until one day, he was appointed as the leader of the group. Of course, he knew that it happened because these people wanted to rely on his protection. He was not as naive as before to believe that it was given to him because he deserved it. In any case, it was his life now, continuing to slaughter the infected while protecting those that had been relying on him. "Dad, I'm going," he murmured as he led his group out into the chaotic city. ****. It's amusing that a human can emit that amount of bloodlust. It's a bit unsettling at the same time. Fortunately, the target of that bloodlust is only the infected. Most humans would not be able to handle it if they were targeted by that." Unexpectedly, someone was watching Joseph's battle with the infected. Furthermore, the person was watching while sitting on the railing of the very bridge where the fight happened. In fact, the survivors that were removing the corpses from the bridge were passing in front of her. Unfortunately, that guy did not pass the criteria. He had potential, though. But seriously, this is why potential gods are troublesome. Just their lack of destiny can affect people's lives drastically. The person, who appeared to be a little girl, grumbled. Seriously. Just why is the territory I'm in charge of terribly lacking talents?" she said as her 3 eyes closed in resignation. "Just when is that guy returning here? It's getting boring here." The girl sighed as she looked at the sky. She could not help but frown. "These visitors are here again. Can't they just stay put somewhere else? They're too annoying. They even took an interest in that red pure spirit tree." The girl then stood up, patting the dust on her skirt. "I better warn that thing to stay away from his base. He will surely not feel happy being spied by those visitors." And with that, the girl vanished like a ghost. She was heading towards that invisible unidentified flying object that was flying towards the direction of General Nakar, Quezon. *****, day 144 to 12:49 a.m. Unknown space. The infected are evolving fast. It is very unprecedented. No, not only the infected. Even humans. The grayling professor muttered, looking at the data of his research since the start of the outbreak. Several translucent data windows floated around him, filled with letters, symbols, and even pictures. This alien was no other than Professor Alpha Alston, the alien professor who was observing the infected in the containment zone, aka Atlantic City. It is strange. The other instances did not evolve that fast. He murmured as he waved around his hands, shuffling the data windows around. Looking at the data windows, surprisingly, it was not only about Earth. The other data windows contained information about other planets, living or not, that was affected by what they called universal cataclysmic pathogen, infector. Of course, it was the name that it went by in generalization. In terms of subtypes, it was called differently. Mutagenic pathogen, mutagen, was only one of those subtypes. Each planet was affected differently by the infector. Planet L34543313 suffered under an infector subtype called Ragan, an airborne pathogen causing rage, and at later stages, muscle mutation. Star System 218743, enveloped by infector subtype called Varson, one of the strangest pathogens due to being controllable by songs of certain individuals. Experimental planet Arielis, affected by the psi pathogen, turning creatures into mindless infected psychics, and some immune people gained psychic powers. Unfortunately, no specimen was recovered as the whole planet exploded more than 1,000 years ago. These were just 3 among hundreds and thousands of planets and star systems that were conquered by Infector. And now, Earth. And strange enough, mutagen was something that behaved differently on every individual depending on their mindset, emotions, lifestyle, and genes. Among the types of Infector, it was the hardest to predict. Is it because of the stagnant evolution state of creatures on Earth? Stagnant evolution state. It was the state where the creatures of a planet reached the peak state and could not evolve any further. Was it something all genetic? Unfortunately, no. As the ease of life developed, it became more and more unnecessary for humans to find the need to evolve. However, when the apocalypse came, that ease and peaceful life vanished in an instant. As there was danger in every corner, humans found a strong reason to evolve. To grow stronger. And strangely enough, mutagen complemented that need. Unfortunately, not only on humans but also the infected and other creatures on Earth. Reading the data windows, Professor Alston slumped on his chair. I was tasked to analyze what pathogen will appear on Earth. But how am I going to do it? The pathogen on Earth is divided further into countless subtypes. Are they going to tell me to examine all the existing creatures and infected on Earth? Let's put this for later. Professor Alston waved his hand outward, causing all the data windows to pile up before vanishing. Then, he pulled another data window out of nowhere. Well then, what are we going to do with this? He said, looking at the image of a huge red glowing tree in the mountains in Southeast Asia. At this moment, a small prompt appeared to his side, blinking with a red light. His beady eyes blinked as he lightly touched the prompt. Professor. A voice echoed in his mind. What is it now? Betha. Your group is supposed to investigate that tree, isn't it? Professor. We have an issue regarding the investigation. We are stopped from investigating by one of this planet's guardians. Hearing that, Professor Alston rubbed his hairless head. Then abort it. The professor sighed. We are only here to investigate. If we are stopped by the guardians, we can only retreat. It's not worth it to provoke them. By your orders, Professor, Betha confirmed. By the way, I found something odd. What is it? Do you remember the energy fluctuation in Camden in New Jersey some time ago? That one with your acquaintance? What suddenly brought that topic? Professor asked, intrigued. The human DNA signatures of some people in the nearby school at that time appeared here for some reason. They were in the human settlement exactly under the investigation target. I believe you know these DNA signatures. At that, several data windows appeared in front of Professor Alston. Sure enough, it surprised him. Professor? Is something wrong? Betha's voice echoed as the professor went silent. No, it's nothing. I'll check on these DNA signatures. For the meantime, I need you to investigate something else. I'll send you the location coordinates. I received it, Professor. We will head out right away. This country is being covered by as right now because of a volcanic eruption. It might be bad to our reactors. All right, I'll cut it off. I still have a lot of work to do. Yes, Professor. And there, the conversation ended. Professor Alston, however, was now staring at the data windows in front of him. It was the data windows of several survivors from Bally's casino that escaped. Is that tree connected to that strange creature, somehow? Professor Alston could not help but mutter. Day 145 to 10:15 a.m. Mountain Base, Mount Malabito, General Nakar, Quezon. Mark's group had returned to the base once more. Everyone was definitely happy to see them safe and sound. Their worry was not surprising considering that the workers that cleared up the dried trees around Shio in the spirit dimension witnessed the danger of facing the magical infected from there. Of course, Mark's group did not return without conveying the news to the stone fortress about the destruction of the kingdom of Black Duendes. Without a doubt, they were shocked by the news. Mark's small group managed to take down the whole kingdom of Duendes. It was not easy to believe. Well, if they knew that Mark did most of the work and it was just because they were caught while escaping, they might plant their faces on the ground. However, with the presence of Lumeria, it was hard to deny it. Not to mention that King Hiramano and Diwata Denaya would definitely not doubt Felinia, who was the princess of brown duendes that was Terimalio's first wife. This news, however, put the representatives of the races in the stone fortress in an uneasy situation. They started to become more humble to Mark and his group, especially to May and the three girls. It was not out of respect, however, but fear. Their group that took down the dreaded Lucario and his kingdom could do the same to their tribes with ease. It was extremely lucky of them that Mark's group were their allies. Nevertheless, not all of the news was good. It was because of the threat of the demons that was still lurking in the dark. The destruction of the kingdom of black duendes would only delay them at most but would definitely not stop their plans and goals. Unfortunately, even though Mark's group brought back Ilvela for interrogation, there was not too much to learn from her. Yes, she was the latest queen of Lucario and the bridge between the alliance of Lucario's kingdom and the demons. However, that was all. There was nothing more to her role. She was not even versed in battle or privy of the demons' plans. And in fact, she was nothing but a succubus with outstanding appearance until she was given to Lucario. For most of the demons' activities in the kingdom of black duendes, it was Dregger that held the highest authority. And unfortunately, Mark already killed that demon lizard man. All they managed to get from Ilvela that gladly cooperated to preserve her life was information about the leader of the demons that allied with Lucario and their primary goal. Unexpectedly, the leader of these demons was the infamous trinity of demons that reigned in the Bicol region's darkest depths, Nagand, Magkabarubak, and Arapian. These three demons had a form of powerfully built handsome men filled with tribal tattoos on their bodies. But why just a leader but not leaders when there were three of them? It seemed that in the current situation, the three were in their true form of a three-headed demon and was leading the demons in search of something. Sure enough, although Ilvela did not know what it was, the target of the three-headed demon was located under the stone fortress, and there was only one thing sealed in that place. Fortunately, as Mark destroyed the kingdom of black duendes and killed all the spies he detected in the stone fortress, it would take some time before the demons could make another move. It would give the stone fortress more time to prepare. If lucky, the things that were predicted to happen would make the demons not be able to make a move at all in the future. Even so, there was no time to let their guards down. When Mark's group left the stone fortress, the representatives of the races were discussing methods to avoid demons' spies from entering the fortress in the future. As for the imprint of Diwata Lualhati, there were no words about her. It was not like she could leave the sealed area, and there was no reason for Mark's group to meet her either. Though as it seemed, as the imprint woke up because of Mark, Diwata Danaya started to seek advice from the ancient Diwata about many things. Ilvela, on the other hand, begged for Mark to bring her with his group. She had nowhere to go anymore. Leaving her in the stone fortress would lead her to get killed for revenge. In fact, many of the races were asking for her execution. It was not surprising since many warriors of the stone fortress died in the ambush the demons orchestrated. Even if she was let go and returned to where her race lived, she would be killed without a doubt. There was no reason to. Unfortunately for the races, Ilvela was captured by Mark. Only he would be able to decide her fate. And to that, Mark chose to bring the succubus with him. In fact, this decision made some of the races think that Mark was being manipulated. It was commonly known how a succubus could control men using their charm and abilities. Of course, it was not the case. It was quite impossible to happen to Mark. Not only Ilvela was extremely afraid of Mark, but he was also surrounded by girls that would not get affected by her abilities. Mark was immune to mental attacks, especially against emotion-controlling ones. He was wearing one piece of the pair of agimets that he got with May during their date last time. Just this piece alone could ward off mental attacks. But why did Mark bring her back? It was a question to many, even in Mark's group. Lucario was quite uncomfortable with Ilvela around. It was not surprising considering their situation before. The only difference now was that their positions were reversed entirely. Even so, now that she was also under Mark's command, there was nothing she could say about it. Their return sure surprised the new members and the 9 slaves. Just the fact that Mark had his own pure spirit tree filled Lucario and Ilvela with awe. While the two knew that they would be following Mark to the mortal world, no one told them about this. Furthermore, it was a kind of spirit tree that they had not heard about. However, what amazed them the most was Mark's base. A place where people gathered under the night-evered spirit tree. They had never seen a place that looked so dark but filled with vitality. The reddish-black walls made of unknown metal made the base appear to be impregnable, but the glow of lights and the leaves of the tree had filled it with life. And now, the residents of the base were in awe as they stared at the humanoid contraption sitting in front of Mark's house. "You brought something amazing again, boss," Huey said while observing the detail of the golem. "We just found it abandoned inside a treasury," Mark replied, making the others look at him with a sigh. "Just where would you find something like this abandoned? What's wrong with you all?" "It's true," Mark said, sensing their thoughts. What he said was true, after all. "Mark, can this thing really move or it's just props?" Alana asked, knocking at the arm of the golem. "I don't really know. I'll study it first." Mark replied once more, looking at the whole golem. The golem was too big that he could not find a place to put it. That was why he took it out in front of his house. The only place in the base where it would fit was Amy's house, but it would be inappropriate to store this huge thing inside another person's home. "By the way, is there still space in the warehouse?" Mark asked Huey. The warehouse. It was one of the new additions to the base. Initially, it was just a small building on the north side of the base where they planned to store the harvest once the crops had fully grown. However, because of the attack of the Great One that ruined the crops they painstakingly planted, the building was rendered useless. In the preparation for the second wave, however, the warehouse was renovated into a large one where they housed the supplies that they gathered. At Mark's question, Huey turned to Ed, the person in charge of the construction. "Ed, it's almost full, right? Is the new room in the warehouse finished?" "Not yet. I still need to do some fixes on the roofing," Ed replied, scratching his head. "The room can be used already, though, as long as no fragile items are placed. A few things could fall while fixing the roof and it's not good if things broke because of that." "It's enough," Mark interjected. "We just need a place big enough to dump the things we found." And there, Mark and May dumped the things they still had in their rings. Sure enough, that made the others gawk. Weapons, armor, even other strange stuff. "Boss, did you raid a castle or something?" Huey asked as he picked up a sword embedded with a yellow shining gem. "We did, right?" Mark replied, looking at Pephile, who could only shrug. After that, they returned home. Terimalio led his mother to their new abode while Ilvela was called to follow Mark. On the other hand, the still confused slaves were brought by Huey to the dwelling and to brief them on the current situation of Earth. At this moment, eating lunch early, everyone gathered at the dining table. "Master, you still have another trip to do, right? Are you all going to stay for the night?" Odalina asked. "I wish I could." Mark shrugged. "We still have at least 2 trips to do." 2? Everyone turned at Mark, even May. From what they knew, only Pephile's request was left. Of course, it was not the quest to find the inheritors of the crystals that Freed wanted to find. That would count as more than 1 trip. Who knows how many trips would it take to find all the inheritors? "I just want to visit someplace. There's something I should check out." "Is that so?" Jaya said, hearing his reply. Most of the time, she would ask annoying questions. But this time, managed to notice that Mark did not want to say it. "By the way, Master," Aphelia spoke. "Did Miss Alana and Miss Colleen tell the news?" "What news? I saw Alana but Colleen is not here right now, right?" "Ah, right," Aphelia remembered. Miss Colleen asked Spera to bring her to Infanta to see her father. Then, Miss Alana might have forgotten to tell you. They received news that Tall volcano erupted yesterday. Bay City settlement seemed to be heavily affected by the ashfall. "I see. That's another hurdle for them, huh?" Mark said with a sigh. Sometimes, things were already hard but life would just throw more rocks on you. Still, Mark could not help but wonder if his friends there were still fine. Also, General Perez's wife, who seemed to have connections to Fried's bloodline. In any case, there was nothing he could do about that. There was no way that he would be able to blow away all the ash or block the volcano with the crystals he currently had. Well, Odile, Mark turned to Odilina. Well, stay for the night and leave in the morning. Yes, master. Odilina smiled. I'll make sure to make a good dinner. After the early lunch, time to deal with another business. Come with me. Mark told Ilvela. There was only the two of them as Mark led the succubus to the lowest chamber of his house. This made Ilvela a bit nervous. At places like this was where dark things happen, after all. Don't worry. As long as you behave, nothing will happen to you, Mark said, looking at the succubus behind him from above his shoulder. I just brought you here to show something and ask your opinion. Ilvela nodded as they headed at the furthest cell. Sure enough, this place was a prison. However, what was imprisoned were not humans but infected. And at that furthest cell, the moans of pleasure echoed. Even Ilvela, that was a succubus, could not help but shudder at those noises. Day 145 to 12:13 p.m. Underground chambers, Cliff House, Mountain Base, Mount Malabito, General Nakar, Quezon Province. Ilvela was quite unsettled as to where Mark had brought her. She started thinking about the worst things that could happen, even more since she was a beautiful succubus. The succubus and incubus races were demons dreaded by many because of their ability to charm people and drain their vitality for consumption. A person whose vitality was absorbed would likely have a shorter lifespan, become sickly, and die from illnesses in the worst cases. That was why humans, a race that had short lifespans, were afraid of these lust-invoking demons. However, while humans feared them, it was different in the demon realm, the darker depths of the spirit dimension. In the place where most demon races resided, the succubus and incubus races were among the weaker ones. They did not have the physical or magical strength of other demons. That was one of the reasons why their race could never be independent and was always under the rule of someone stronger. If they were not under someone's protection, the worst things could happen. After all, among the demon races, the succubus and incubus races possessed the beauty that other races did not have. It was not hard to imagine what things their race would undergo in a place where the only law was someone's strength. And hearing those unsettling noises behind the closed door in front of her, Ilvela could not help but feel afraid. What if Mark planned to do something like that from the start? What if that was the reason he brought her back? She did not know what to think of it. Yes, she was used as a bargain and became Lucerio's woman. It was not all because she wanted to do so, but it was her task. It was her mission. And even if that was the case, just by standing beside Lucerio, she had freedom and luxury. Unless everything fell, no one could threaten her. Unfortunately, the plan failed. Moreover, most of the demons in the kingdom of Black Duendes died. No, they got massacred than just dying. And now, would she become a slave for pleasure? While those negative thoughts stormed her mind, she heard an audible sigh from in front of her. That was when Ilvela realized that Mark was already looking at her with an annoyed expression. Don't think about unnecessary things. I already said earlier, behave, and nothing will happen to you. Are you not listening? Why yes, sorry. Ilvela replied. What is behind the door is not what you think. Take a look. Mark said as he opened the door. Immediately, the unpleasant whiff entered their noses. It was a smell that was not unfamiliar to a succubus like Ilvela. However, the scent was too strong and seemed to have a very potent effect on increasing someone's vigor. Even of Ilvela, just a single sniff and her face already turned bright red. Ilvela's body started to feel hot. Of course, she knew why. She tried to contain it in. However, it was too potent for her. That was when she flinched as someone's touch on her shoulder stimulated the effects of the scent on her body. She was about to lose it. But then, a strange sensation entered her body from that hand. That comfortable sensation made her release a seductive moan as the effect of the scent vanished from her body. Ilvela could not help but fall on the floor with her legs weakened. Can you stop that? Mark asked, totally annoyed. I'm sorry. Ilvela panicked. She also noticed that Mark was not letting go of her shoulder. I didn't expect that it will have a stronger effect on you. Odal and Aphelia can still handle it. Mark said, not minding the smell that was entering his nose. I'll hold onto your shoulder for now so you won't get affected too much. Let's go in. Ilvela struggled to stand up a little. Her legs were a bit numb, and to frankly say, a bit wet in between. That was a succubus for you. After they entered the door, the moans continued from inside. Even the squishing sound was now audible. As Ilvela peered inside, she could not help but feel surprised. There, a woman was present, sitting in the corner of the room, busy poking her insides with her sticky fingers. As the woman saw someone enter the room, she raised her head. Her hand was not stopping, though. However, as she saw that it was Mark that entered, a male, the woman stood up and tried to charge towards Mark. Unfortunately for the woman, a chain attached her right foot and to the wall stopped her. With a weakened growl, her face planted onto the floor. Even so, she did not stop. She tried to tug into the chains, trying to approach Mark with high sexual vigor. However, the chains on her foot were not just for show. She could tear down normal ones in a jiff, and thus, the ones on her foot were several times thicker and sturdier. This woman was no other than Vem. She was one of the raiders that attacked them back in Perpetual Help University and were one of the subjects of Mark's experiments together with her companions, Giffer and Logan. The result turned her into a lustful, failed mutator. Mark approached Vem, lowering his body to touch her head. Vem caught his hand, though, and tried to lick his fingers. As she did that, Mark raised his 2 fingers and poked Vem's eyes. Vem was jolted by the pain and let go of Mark's hand. Covering her painful eyes with her hands, she growled and rolled on the floor. That was when Mark grabbed her head and put her to sleep. As she had fallen asleep, the scent that was coming from her also stopped, allowing Ilvela to come closer. The succubus could not help but become curious at the woman that seemed to be the embodiment of lust because of her behavior. Is she what you want to show me? Ilvela asked, poking on Vem's face. She could not help but look at Vem's body. Her body was covered with armor at some parts, but her perky chest and strangely shaved under was exposed. That's right, Mark said as he picked up Vem and laid her on the barely used bed. Ilvela saw that happen and felt strange that she could not detect any sign of lust or arousal from Mark. He was basically holding onto a creature begging to be used, after all. Just what are you thinking? Mark turned as Ilvela was not responding. Nothing, she hastily replied and approached Vem once more. Can I take a look at her first? Ilvela asked. Go on. Mark made way. That's what I brought you here for. Ilvela took a last look at Mark before concentrating on Vem. And to say, Ilvela herself was curious about this woman. In fact, she could sense something familiar with Vem. Ilvela held onto Vem. Her right hand was on the latter's forehead, while the left was on Vem's lower abdomen. Mark watched the scene, unsure about what Ilvela was doing. What he could tell was that Ilvela seemed to be injecting her magical energy into Vem's body. This, Ilvela muttered with surprise. She then stood up and faced Mark. How is it? Mark asked. Can I ask something first? Ilvela replied with another question. You can, Mark replied. But whether I will answer, depends on your question. This woman. What happened to her? Such a simple question. There was no reason for Mark to not answer. As such, he told her what happened. Mark started about mutators and failed ones, to his experiment, creating the current Vem. Of course, he did not forget to say that they were enemies that tried to attack his group first. Ilvela could not help but look away from Mark after hearing what he did to Vem. She was even more scared to become his enemy now. I already told you what happened. Mark did not seem to care about her reaction. Now, tell me what you found out. Ilvela took a deep breath as she looked at Mark and started to explain. I'm not really an expert at this kind of stuff, so I'm not too sure, but I think this woman might have a succubus blood on her. Ilvella's words confirmed Mark's suspicion about Vem. Although he told her about mutators, he did not mention anything about mutagen mutating people in certain aspects because of their family's bloodline. For Ilvella to say it, albeit being unsure, it was already a concrete assessment. There is another thing. Ilvella added. This woman had the perfect body for a succubus. If she really had succubus blood, she might have come from the lineage of the ancient succubus. You say ancient. Mark frowned. They don't exist anymore? To that question, Ilvella lowered her shoulder with a sigh. As far as I know, they are already gone. You can say that they are our pure blood ancestors. Right now, as succubus did not have any purebloods anymore. It's not like our lineage got mixed or something. It could not be helped considering our nature. However, that is not the reason why our purebloods got extinct. At this point, Ilvella sat down on Vem's bed, lifting her arm. You see this? Ilvella pointed at Vem's exposed skin and lined up her own arm beside it. Our purebloods had lighter skin. Mine is darker because I'm not a pureblood. Even the succubus races from other countries don't have this light skin at all. Also, that smell coming from her body, it's a trait of our purebloods. That, however, caused them to become favorite slaves. They were hunted down and caught, turning into toys of other races, but into entertainment establishments for the rest of their lives. And then, Ilvella looked at Vem with a sad look. I'm surprised that I'm able to meet a possible pureblood. Unfortunately, you broke her mind already. Don't say it that way. Mark shrugged. That's way out of context. To say that he broke her mind. Although Ilvella could not understand what was wrong with what she said, Mark was disturbed by it. Then, this will be your job. Mark smiled. Job? Ilvella asked, confused. That's right. Your job. I can't have you staying here without doing anything, right? Besides, only a succubus knows what another succubus needs. About the aphrodisiac she emits. We'll lend you some equipment to deal with that. That's... Ilvella was quite unsure. After that insane display of Vem earlier, it would be questionable if she would be confident about it. You can do it. Mark urged. Aside from her insatiable lust, she's not harming anyone. We already had one of her kind running about in the base and getting schooled properly. So if you are lucky and manage to teach her, you might have a pureblood in your race in the future. Mark's words made Ilvella gulp. Her race having a pureblood once more, it was a great temptation. As there was nothing to do here anymore, Mark and Ilvella left the sleeping Vem. Ilvella still needed time to think about it and Mark was not in a hurry. However, before they stepped out of the chambers, Ilvella made up her mind. Sir. So, you wanted to take care of her? Mark said, without looking back. Ilvella was quite surprised as Mark seemed to have known before she could say anything. It was not the first time. Earlier, she noticed that it seemed that Mark had the ability to read her mind. Even so, it did not matter. She already decided. Yes, I'll do it. But, will I really be safe here? Don't worry. As long as you behave and do your job properly, you will be fine here. And there, Mark secured another caretaker for one of his experiment subjects. Mark tasked Jolene in briefing Ilvella of things around the base and to bring her into the place she would stay in the future. I wonder if Ilvella can turn Vem into someone like Carla. Mark murmured as he watched Jolene take Ilvella away excitedly. In any case, there was nothing much to worry about in the base for now. I better prepare for tomorrow. Day 146 to 7:11 a.m. Mount Malabito, General Nakar, Quezon Province, Philippines. The sun had barely risen when Mark's group left the base. Even so, almost everyone was present to send them off. Well, at least those that were currently present in the base. Spera and Colleen, along with other people, were not here, after all. The former was busy gathering supplies from everywhere she could with the team tasked with it while Colleen was together with her father in New Infanta settlement with Carla. Seriously, being able to travel back and forth to see their family and friends was a privilege that only the people in this base had. At least, to a certain degree, as it was not like Spera could open a portal to anywhere she wanted. Also, it was only possible if there was an extra opportunity to open a portal, as her ability was critically needed by the base. When Mark's group left, it was composed of lesser people. Torimelio's business was done, and he already reunited with his mother, and thus, he, his mother, and his harem had to stay behind in the base. Although Torimelio insisted that he wanted to come and be of help to Mark to return the favor, the latter did not allow it. No, his abilities would be even more needed in the base than Mark's group. Together with Lumeria, the protective layers of their home could be enforced further. Furthermore, the reason for the reduction of members was because the next journey was unlike the ones before. The Stone Fortress and the Kingdom of Black Duendes were not far from the location of their base. There was just a mountain or two that was needed to travel to get to those places. The location of Pfeil's request was not that close to this place. Was it in Infanta? After all, that was the place where Mark met Pfeil and Edsel. Unfortunately, no, the Tamawo was a tribal spirit race that originated from the Visayas. Meeting one in Infanta, Quezon, a part of Luzon, was utterly unexpected. Of course, it was not without any reason. The only thing was that Pfeil did not want to say anything until the time was right. Furthermore, this time, they were not going to travel in the spirit dimension. Not only the destination was too far, but traveling on the other side would consume more time and would be even more dangerous compared to the mortal side of Earth. Where did they need to go? The province of Cebu, in the municipality of Badian, to be exact. In that place, the Kawasan Falls was located. That was where the entrance to the kingdom of Tamawas could be found. It was not surprising considering the tales and legends that bound the Tamawo and the Kawasan Falls. The only question was what Pfeil doing in Infanta and how in the world did he have a family there. In this journey, Torimelio was left behind even though he wanted to come. On the other hand, there was someone in the group that was questioning the reason why he was here in the first place. It was no other than Edsel, although he did not dare voice it. Edsel and Pearl were still among the group. It was not surprising that he was confused since Pfeil and Mark did not say anything to him yet about the situation. Cebu was their final destination on this journey, however, they were not going there yet. From the location of the mountain base, traveling straight to Cebu would need them going towards the south and a little bit southeast direction. However, the direction they were going at the moment was directly east. Before going to Cebu, Mark wanted to pass by somewhere else. Of course, it was not where they would be going at this moment. This direction was towards New Infanta settlement. The flight was not too long, and the New Infanta settlement was in sight. Sure enough, there were a lot of changes since the last time that Mark went here. The dilapidated houses were now fixed, and the barely finished walls now stood tall. Of course, this was nowhere near compared to the current state of Bay City. However, it was way better than nothing. Well, while the defenses had been reinforced, it seemed that life here was still not that easy. Everyone had to work hard if they wanted to have their next meal. It was not like the military would not provide it, but if they ran out, there was no way they could do anything but hunt for themselves. Sure enough, the appearance of Chaflar, a large dragon, coming from the mountains alerted the people. The soldiers were calm, though. It seemed that they had been informed of the arrival of Mark's group. However, it seemed that some people were panicking. It was clear that these people were new here and never saw Chaflar before. Chaflar landed in the military camp without problems, although there were quite many people trying to see what was going on from outside. Nearby, General Faustino was already waiting alongside the super soldier mercenary, Jones Galley. "Nice to see you again," General Faustino greeted with a handshake. For formalities, Mark accepted the handshake with a sigh. "We won't stay long. Is the package ready?" Mark asked. The general could only shrug as he beckoned Jones to step forward. In the mercenary's hands were two large briefcases, very identical to the one that Mark brought to Bay City before. "I apologize for relying on you again with this, but I can't help but take on the opportunity after hearing that you will go to Catanduanes." General Faustino smiled bitterly. Last night, Mark used the radio to contact the general to ask for any kind of information about Catanduanes at the moment. After all, It was one of the locations where a military settlement was built. But of course, the question of whether Mark would go there came up, and to get enough information, Mark had no choice but to say his plan. Thus, the general took the opportunity to rely on Mark once more. Like back then, when Mark went to Bay City to fetch May and the girls, General Faustino wanted Mark to deliver one of the 2 briefcases to the Katandwanas settlement. There was no need to ask what was inside the case. It was clear what it contained. Of course, Mark was compensated like before. In the other briefcase was printed information of Katandwana's settlement along with a recommendation letter and several vials of regeneration medicine. This way, Mark's group would not have any problems entering the settlement there. "You are really in a hurry, huh?" Jones said as he handed the briefcases. "I bet you guys are too," Mark replied. Both General Faustino and Jones Galley could only shrug. "We had been preparing since Alana and Colleen contacted us." General Faustino sighed. "But I want to hear it straight from you. Is this second wave really happening?" "I'm not sure either." Mark shook his head. "Unfortunately, the source of information is not someone we can't ignore." "Who?" Jones asked. "Let's just say that it's someone like a God's apostle." "You are serious, right?" Jones could not believe it easily. "I didn't think that you're someone religious." "No, I'm not religious myself. I barely prayed, and the last time was when I'm 7. Mark explained, making everyone around him look at him incredulously, but then, he added, "It doesn't really matter who is the source. It's not like there's something bad in preparing for anything bad that could possibly happen." To Mark's words, everyone could not help but agree. There was nothing wrong with preparing for the worst. What was wrong was when you already knew and did nothing until that worst came and you could not do anything but regret. In the middle of the conversation, "Hey, smelly uncle!" a shout was heard as the green-haired girl ran into the plaza. Of course, it was no other than the brat dryad girl Amika. Behind her was her little brother, Mikio, together with Colleen and Carla. "Who are you calling smelly?" Mark shook his head. "Look, I'm even cleaner than you." Amika could not help but stop on her steps, looking at Mark and at her clothes. That was right. Mark looked cleaner than her. Even though they were VIPs here in the settlement, it did not mean that they could squander resources like food and clean water. Right now, the clothes she was wearing were only lightly washed in the river. Amika could only groan in defeat. But at this time, Mark noticed that Amika had a backpack on her back. Furthermore, she was wearing some child-sized protection gear. Instead of asking the girl, however, Mark turned to Colleen. "What's going on? This girl heard that you will be coming today. She said that she wanted to come with you." Colleen said, rubbing her forehead. It seemed that she was also nagged by this girl. "And she went on like this?" Mark asked, pointing at her attire that was ready for battle. "Hey, I got permission from Mom," Amika interjected, jumping in front of Mark, trying to block his line of sight. "But you didn't get any permission from me, right?" The bickering of the two could not help but receive hidden giggles and smiles from the soldiers around them. At this time, Amika's mother, Rosami, appeared, carrying a large backpack together with the mischievous dryad girl's uncle, Professor Sherville. As it seemed, Amika really got her mother's permission. By the looks of it, Rosami was here to ask Mark to bring Amika with him. "You want me to bring her with us?" Mark asked before Rosami could even say anything. "Actually, yes." Rosami was embarrassed. She had been begging since last night. "I can only allow her. Of course, only if you agreed." "You trust me that much to leave your daughter in my hands?" Mark asked. And, of course, Rosami shook her head. "Not totally. However, I trust my daughter. I know her. You can't underestimate her. She won't interact with anyone that she can't trust. Even here, our family aside, she's only interacting with Jones. She doesn't even play with other children. That's why I think, that can make her behave like a brat like this will be fine." Mark was quite surprised by that. Who would think that this bratty little dryad would not interact with other people? Now that Rosami mentioned it, He barely remembered Emika talking to other people back then. Only to him. It was strange. And to say, Mark felt his nose a bit itchy. Mark turned to May, and she nodded. There was no need to ask her, she would go with anything Mark arranged. All right. You can go with us. But remember to behave or this will be the last time. We're not going out to play. Hearing those words made Emika smile from ear to ear. I know, I'll behave. I promise. Emika then raised her pinky finger towards Mark. With a sigh, Mark accepted it. And there, with a bit more farewell and words, Mark's group left New Infanta Settlement with an unexpected additional member. And to say, this journey would be noisy, at least, towards Mark. Even so, Emika's abilities could be of help, considering that they would face the Tamawo, who were forest dwellers. While riding on Schaffler's back, Mark started to read the files on the case given to him. Behind him, however, everyone now knew where he wanted to go next. The place was the Katandwana's settlement, and unfortunately, none of them why Mark wanted to go there. No one dared to ask either. As for May, there was no reason for her to ask at all. Well, no one dared to ask, aside from one person. Nay, uncle. Why are we going to Katandwana's? The other could only smile bitterly as to how this girl was such a brat towards Mark. Day 146 to 9:01 a.m. Mount Ramelo, Real, Quezon Province, Philippines. Leaving the New Infanta settlement, Mark directed Schaffler to fly towards the south, maintaining their flight over the eastern coastline of Real, Quezon. From Infanta, it would be faster if they flew southeast, over the ocean, following Polillo Strait and soon, Lamon Bay. However, flying straight towards the direction of Katandwana's would lead them to a 100-kilometer flight over the ocean waters. That was even farther than flying from New Infanta settlement to Bay City, which only had a 75-kilometer distance. There was no way that Schaffler would be able to fly that far in one go. Going through a few islands was also an option. However, it did not remove the fact that it was far more dangerous to travel above the ocean than on land. Well, it might be safer in other kinds of a zombie apocalypse, but not in this one. On land, one could encounter infected flying animals, infected humans, feral evolved animals, and humans. In most circumstances, these things were threatening enough to drive people to travel on water. The humans that one could meet might also be hostile. In Mark's group, however, that was not the case. Flying on a dragon's back, they would only encounter infected and feral birds. As for humans, only idiots would try to go and approach a gigantic flying lizard that was passing by. And since Mark was here, there was no way that humans would be able to sneak at them without knowing at all. On the ocean, however, although the main threat would be infected and feral birds, under the waters, however, everything was unknown. Infected fish? Maybe. However, who knows what kinds of mutations they might have undergone. It would not be hard to imagine a school of mutated fish that could snipe birds from the sky. And thus, Mark played it safe. On their left was the ocean, while on their right were the mountains. He went between the two, making it easier to change direction whenever needed. The flight was peaceful. Well, not exactly. They got attacked by flying insects several times coming from the mountains. As there was just one or two at a time, May shot them down without getting close. Along the way, Mark kept on reading the papers he was handed. The information he asked about. Although most of it was the list of survivors they currently had, some of it contained some crucial information. One paper, in particular, made him frown a bit. "Gerger, what's wrong?" May asked as she noticed this. "Look." Mark handed May the paper he was currently reading. "The New People's Army?" May asked, reading just the first paragraph written on the paper. "Yep. It looks like some of their people found the outbreak an opportunity to rise into power." Mark sighed. It was not really unexpected. The New People's Army was the armed wing of the Communist Party of the Philippines, or the CPP. It was a principal organization, aiming to consolidate political power from bourgeois reactionary puppet government. As what they saw, there were several provinces under their influence in the Philippine countryside. They had been peace talks in the past, though it had reached an impasse with the current Philippine government shutting it down. Presently, the Philippine government and other foreign agencies designated it as a terrorist group, along with the CPP. There had been quite a few known encounters between the government and the NPA, with most of it resulting in blood being shed by either party. Now, however, it looked like some of them decided that it was their time to take over the country. At least the Catanduanes, where one of their bases lay, for now. Well, not everyone as it seemed. It looked like among NPA, factions were also present. For now, there were 3 that were known. One aimed for peace talks, the second planned to drive the government out of the island, and lastly, the third was focusing on their own preservation. So far, the peace talks faction was not succeeding, with the second faction creating conflict every time. Unfortunately, the second faction seemed to have the most members, rendering the first helpless. As for the third, they did not care what will be the outcome of the 2 other factions as long as they could stay alive. In the past months, it seemed that the second faction was rolling, creating conflict with the military at any possible time they could. Contesting for supply locations, ambushing military transport convoys, and even soldiers and kidnapping refugees for ransom. Because of this, the military stationed there could not have even just a day of peace without worrying when those bastards would attack again. Unfortunately, the military there could not just go and wipe them out. Not only that it would risk the soldiers being on the enemy's home ground, but the soldiers were undermanned. If that really happened, it would end up with armed refugees having to fight combat-trained enemies. A direct confrontation was not viable to the military's current situation. All they could do was apply countermeasures and minimize the damage. It looks like the paper is missing some details, May said, reading the paper halfway. General Faustino said that the communication there is quite rough. They're not able to build communication relay antennas over such a long distance. Every time they manage to establish connections, it's fuzzy and short. Mark then showed the other paper in his hand. Look, the last transmission is more than a week ago. It was one of the most unfortunate things. Satellite communication was down, and the Philippine military had to rely on their third world equipment to transmit information and communicate with other military settlements. There was no way that they would be able to establish clear communication. Even so, the information that General Faustino gave was more than enough for Mark to have a proper insight into the current state of the military settlement in Catanduanes. At this moment, Emika suddenly yelled out, "Uncle, look." Not only Emika was but Abigail, Iola, and Miracle were looking in the same direction. The girls were bored and decided to sightsee while flying. Of course, they were the first to spot that thing in the distance. What thing? Nothing. Just a 4-meter-tall blob of humanoid walking meat. Yes, that was the exact description. Looking at it, it seemed to be a skinless humanoid filled with disgusting toad-like boils all over its fat body. Emika groaned as she took a closer look at the creature. It was far more than just disgusting. That came out of nowhere, Mark said, looking down at the creature. Smelly uncle, is that a joke? It looked like Emika got what Mark did. This creature was definitely out of nowhere. After all, they were currently flying in a place where there's only an uncemented road by the shoreline. Basically, nowhere. This is the first time we encountered a failed mutator after a while, Mark said, ignoring the noisy little girl. That was right, it was not an infected by a failed mutator. The last time that Mark encountered one when he turned them into one of them. It seemed that inside heavily populated areas, seeing failed mutators was next to none. That circumstance was not surprising since both failed mutators and the infected attack each other on sight. Inside cities where the number of infected was overwhelming, there was no chance that an insanely behaving failed mutator would survive. Here in the outskirts of the country, where the infected were lesser in number, the failed mutators could thrive and grow. And now, there was this disgusting-looking thing roaming the barren outskirts of real Quezon. Groarr. A gargling-like roar was heard as the creature spotted Chaflar flying over it. Its mouth drooling with pus opened wide as it tried to catch up to the flying dragon. Unfortunately for this guy, there was no way it would be able to with its unsightly body. I don't think I will be able to eat lunch because of that, Emika remarked as the failed mutator roared in fury as its prey got away. Good, we can save on food then, Mark said, going back to the papers he was reading. Hey, of course, Emika took that offensive. There was no way that she would skip food on the road. Emika. Suddenly, May spoke to the green-haired girl. Just how did you manage to make your mother allow you to come with us? May asked the question that everyone here was wondering about. By the looks of it, Rosemi loved her children too much. There was no way she would let her go around at times like this. I told Mom that I will do what I did back then, Emika replied, though she did not seem too proud of it. However, it just made everyone even more curious. By everyone's stares, Emika gave in. Last year. I ran away from home, she stated. You see, Dad's too overprotective, and it's choking. We can't play outside, he chooses who we should befriend, and once he met our friends from school, he will start saying backhand comments about them. Saying we should stay away from who. Even during my birthdays, I can't invite who I want to invite even though Dad would invite the children of his coworkers that we don't even know. Then, he will start drinking with their parents. At my birthday last year, I sneakily invited some of my schoolmates. Of course, my dad can't just drive them away to maintain face, but when my birthday party was over, he started scolding me. That's why I ran away. May and the others could not respond at all. Who would expect something like this? What kind of parent was that? And then, Emika continued. I packed up some leftover food from my birthday party and left home when everyone is sleeping. I can't really go to my friends since I'm sure their parents will call home. That's why I stayed in the streets. I don't know how long, about 2 months, I think. Cough. Edsel choked after hearing that. Not only him, but everyone was looking at Emika like a strange child. How did you manage to do that? Pearl could not help but ask. Oh, I dug through restaurant trash cans and slept with other homeless children. I didn't even beg, not even once. She replied proudly. I got good friends there. We all start running away every time welfare workers wanted to bring us away. Sadly, I got caught and they called home. Though it seems that Dad lessened his attitude after that. Now we know where you got that bratty, hard-headed attitude. Mark remarked to the side. Hey, I only pester a few people. Emika retorted. At least you know that you are pestering them, right? Emika groaned, glaring at Mark. You told your mother that you will run away again? May asked. Yes. Emika replied sheepishly. It's boring there. The soldiers are always following us wherever we go and will wait outside the house. It's even hard to play with other children since the soldiers are always watching. The other children are afraid of them, you know. This girl. Mark shook his head. In any case, being under the military's list of people of priority was suffocating. It was not that different from being in a house arrest. No wonder her mother allowed her to join Mark's group. And since she already had a record of running away from home, she might really do it. That would be dangerous. In the least, she will be safe on their side while traveling. Seriously, don't make your mother worry about you, Mark said, making Emika shut up. I just want her to have time for herself, Emika said. Mom is very busy taking care of us and doing some work. If I'm not there, she might have more time for herself. Can't you do things yourself so that your mother will have more free time? May asked. I can, but I'm bad at housework. I always end up worsening things than helping. That's why I wanted to participate in fighting, but they won't let me either. She complained. No wonder, no wonder. If this girl was around helping at home, their mother might end up doing more work. Day 147 to 12:22 p.m. Barangay Pandan, Real, Quezon Province, Philippines. Alternating flying and running, Chaflar managed to bring them to this small community located on the southeast coast of Real, Quezon. They reached this location, which was more than 60 kilometers away from New Infanta settlement pretty fast, because of their dragon mount. If it was by road, It might take them the whole day just because of the danger they might encounter alone. Being able to travel through the air was an advantage at this point. The journey was quite noisy, though, because of Emika. The lively girl could not zip her mouth at all, although most of her topics and questions were aimed at Mark. Nevertheless, even though the peace and quiet were gone, Emika's antics gave liveliness to the group. At this point, they stopped by the shore for lunch, and to save supplies that they were carrying, they went to search a seemingly untouched resort. Sure enough, there was no one here, and there was some canned food left in storage. On the other hand, Mark allowed Chaflar to fly away to search for food. There was no way that they would be able to feed the huge lizard with the human food they were carrying. Besides, the evolved animals suit Chaflar's diet and large appetite more. There might be a lack of evolved animals in the middle of the city but not in the countryside. In fact, while they were eating, they just saw a dog-sized green crab pass by the shore. It did not seem hostile and even ran away when Emika tried to approach it. One thing was strange, though. It's strange that there's no infected, but there are no people either. Pephile said as he looked around the area. The place is a mess, though. Mark said, looking at some overturned things and items thrown here and there. Even so, the place might look like a mess, but there was no sign that the place was looted. If it was, Mark's group would not find food not only in the resort but also at some houses nearby. It looks like everyone left in a hurry, Emika deduced. Everyone could not agree more. Unfortunately, there was no way to know what really happened here. And, of course, their lunch was not uneventful either. A loud crash was heard from the shore, making them run out of the room that they were eating. And there, they saw what another surprise. Octopus. Emika blurted out, seeing the huge octopus that seemed to be catching some large crabs to eat by the shore. Well, more than shocked, she was drooling. She could not help but turn to Mark. "Uncle, can we eat that?" she asked, making the others shake their heads with a sign. Unexpectedly, "I don't know. Why don't we catch it first?" Mark replied positively. And without waiting for anyone, both Mark and Emika jumped out. The two went to catch that octopus that was as large as a Volkswagen Beetle. "Those two really get along well, don't they?" Pephile remarked, seeing the two that ran out with the same goal. And everyone could not help but agree with what he said. Miracle was puffing her cheeks, though. It seems that the youngest of the girls was starting to get jealous. It did not take long, and the octopus was captured alive. It was overkill for both Emika and Mark joining hands to catch it. "Nay, uncle, how do we know that it's edible?" Emika asked, poking at the octopus' slime body. The poor octopus that was only catching its lunch got entangled by both blood metal and the hair vines that Emika made. "Let's ask Chaflar when he gets back," Mark replied. It was not wrong to ask the dragon since animals had the natural instinct to know which prey was edible or not compared to humans. The poor octopus was struggling as it tried to escape from its restraints. Unfortunately, Mark and Emika were both cruel. There was no way for it to escape without tearing all of its tentacles off. "You two, why don't you just kill that?" Pephile could not help but ask. If they were going to eat it, why not kill it already? "It won't be fresh if we kill it now," Mark replied. Pephile was speechless. Soon, Chaflar returned. Even the dragon was confused as to why there was a squirming thing with its master now. However, Chaflar deemed that the octopus was edible. It was good that there was someone to ask before trying it out. Well, Mark was not really afraid of poison as he would be able to push it out using his blood. Still, it would not be a pleasant experience. With lunch being dealt with, they continued on the journey. The only difference was there was a large octopus strapped on Chaflar's body. It was a strange sight. Day 146 to 7:21 p.m. Karamoan Feeder Port, Gaijalo, Karamoan, Camarines Sur. The Karamoan Feeder Port. It was a fish port mostly used by fishermen back before the outbreak. Now, however, the port was barricaded by no other than the Philippine Army. Currently, This port was being used by the soldiers to travel from Katandwanas to the mainland. This was not the closest area of Camarines Sur to the island of Katandwanas. However, there were no properly built ports that the military could use on other nearer places than this one. Furthermore, because of the smaller population of the nearby residential area, the number of infected that they encountered was easily controllable, and they reclaimed this port without any problem. From here, they would receive lucky survivors that managed to reach this place and wish entry to the safety of the island. And even though the last group of survivors that they received was more than a month ago, there were still soldiers stationed in this place. It was not to receive survivors anymore, though. They were stationed here in case that the NPA tried to use this port. Of course, it was not like the NPA could not use other places to anchor their boats. However, here was where the easiest access to the main road was located. As usual, the soldiers were lazing around. They only needed to respond to infected and evolved animal attacks. Fortunately, those did not happen a lot in this place. But then, there was a sudden event at this moment. "Who are you people?" The soldier atop the walls questioned the group of people that arrived outside. It was very unexpected for them, and most of the soldiers were interested in the sudden event. Who would have thought that there were still people that would arrive at this place? Furthermore, what surprised them was the appearance of the group. It was because most of them were females, and 4 were even children. To the soldier's question, the not-so-good-looking man in front answered. "Here." Yes, that was the answer. Unexpectedly, the man stretched out his hand, holding a small envelope. The soldiers were confused. The current guard received the envelope through a slip between the barbed gates and opened it. As it was already dark, he beckoned his companion to point a flashlight on the contents of the paper. After skimming through the letter, the 2 soldiers guarding the gates looked at each other. "Please, wait a minute. We'll call our superior." The tone of the soldiers changed after reading the contents of the letter. The soldier then picked up his radio and started calling. It was just a short call. However, it still took 5 minutes before the person actually arrived. Even the 2 soldiers at the gates and the gallery were already apologetic to the group outside the gates. However, without the go of their superior, entering these gates would not be easy. "Where are the people claiming to be hired by General Faustino?" A grouchy voice echoed as the person they were waiting for arrived. Unexpectedly, it was a soldier with a rather big belly. By the looks of it, he seemed to be sleeping when the call arrived. He was already sleeping even though it was still this early. "Captain, here." The guard at the gates handed the letter, and the fat soldier started to read it with his flashlight. He then inspected the seal that was stamped on the letter that signified the authority of the person who gave it. Of course, it was no other than General Faustino. "Is this real?" The fat soldier frowned, waving the letter in front of his eyes. He then turned to the group outside, looking at them one by one. "You people are delivering something from General Faustino? Where is the package?" The man outside took the briefcase that the beautiful girl beside him was carrying. He then raised it forward. "Here," the man said. "All right, give it to me. Let me check." The gate then opened as the fat soldier tried to take the briefcase. However, his hand reached nothing but air as the man outside pulled the case back. "What are you doing?" The fat soldier almost screamed. "Didn't you read the letter? It should have said there that I can only hand this to General de la Peña. Besides, it's number-coded with a secret code that only in high positions knew. Don't tell me that you were General de la Peña? I just heard them call you, Captain." The fat soldier froze. Even if the man in front of him really gave him the briefcase, there was no way that he would be able to open it without the code. Either way, he would embarrass himself. "Are we allowed to enter now?" the man asked, turning to the guard instead of the fat soldier. No reply was heard, though, as the fat soldier's permission was still needed. Here was when the fat soldier hurriedly replied, "Enter, enter." The fat soldier went out of the way. Geronimo led them to the quarters first. As the fat soldier commanded, one of the soldiers stepped forward to escort the group to the quarters. It was a building being used as a barracks for non-soldiers that were here. It was mostly survivors that reached the place that had used this building. While passing through the gates, however, the fat soldier's eyes were glued onto someone. That was when the man leading the group turned his head behind. "Watch your eyes," he warned. Not only that, but the green-haired girl gave the fat guy a tongue, infuriating him further. However, the fat soldier held it in. If these people were really hired by General Faustino, there was no advantage in offending them. "What are you all looking at? Go back to your posts," the fat soldier yelled as he drove the soldiers that were attracted by the commotion away. ****. I'm sorry about that. Please just don't mind him." The soldier that was guiding Mark's group, Private Geronimo, apologized for their captain's behavior. "You don't have to worry about it," Mark replied, although his expression did not change at all. Private Geronimo was a bit taken aback. It seemed that he managed to perceive what Mark meant by his reply. He did not have to worry about it. It was that person who should worry about himself. "So, we have to stay here for the night?" Mark asked. "Is there a fixed schedule for the boats?" "Yes, unfortunately," Private Geronimo replied. "There is only one boat your group can ride tomorrow at 9 in the morning. That boat is scheduled daily." "Good." Mark nodded and did not ask anything further. Even May and the others were silent. Soon, they arrived at the barracks right beside the pier. It was just a large makeshift hut, though. "This is the place?" Mark asked, seeing the dilapidated structure. Private Geronimo sighed. "Please make do for now. This isn't really the initial place, but..." You already saw our captain." Private Geronimo was already waiting to be scolded. After all, who would want to stay in these dilapidated barracks? "All right, this will do," Mark replied, surprising the soldier. "Just be sure to call us if the boat arrives." Mark then tossed something towards the soldier, making him catch it by reflex. With those words, Mark's group entered the dilapidated structure, leaving the surprised soldier outside while staring at the large can of tuna in his hands.